So our next speaker is Miss Betty Taylor, has worked across the domestic violence area. For the past 33 years, her work has included establishing the Gold Coast Domestic Violence Prevention Centre in 1982. During her career, Betty chaired the Queensland Domestic Violence Council for 2 terms, was successful in lobbying for a standalone strangulation offence and a domestic violence death review board, of which she is still a current member. Betty was involved in the establishment of the Australian Institute for Strangulation Prevention and the Australia's first Strangulation Trauma Centre. Betty's awards include Centenary Medal 2000, Churchill Fellowship in 2002, Queensland Great Award 2020, and the Queensland Finalist Australian of the Year Senior. Betty remains passionate about ending domestic and family violence.
But I just want to start by acknowledging the Turrbal and Jagera people on the land which we meet and pay my respects to their owners past, present and emerging. And in doing this, I'd like to thank Amber and her committee for the opportunity to talk some aspect of there. I want to talk about strangulation, and I know that's a weird topic to talk about, but it's an important topic. But I also want to start by looking at, when we talk about violence against women, what are we actually talking about? And all of my career, which in the domestic violence and sexual assault spheres, it's always been in conflict with someone or other. And this year for Women's Week, the Queensland Office for Women, their theme is keep making noise. And I think, shit, when do we ever stop? And what's acceptable noise? When a group, a wonderful group of women like this have to meet hidden away because it's too risky to be out there. So what rubbish if we're saying, public policy saying, keep making noise. So I encourage us all to do that. But I just want to go back to 1996 when I was taken to the anti-discrimination by the Men's Rights Agency. And they were screaming anti-discrimination because we wouldn't let men who experienced domestic violence into a safe room, the Brisbane Courthouse. And it turned out that the group of men that wanted to barge into that room were perpetrators. We took it there and we won. And I never in a million years thought that 25 years later we'd be back trying to fight for women's spaces, safe spaces for women. And the fight against the transgender activists, I don't see any difference to them and men's rights, quite frankly. Yes. I think it's the same mindset. I think it's driven by patriarchy. I think it's driven by that notion of entitlement, that notion that women don't count, that women, we can just right over the top of them. And at the moment, from the Red Rose Foundation, we're copying it from both. We had one of the things that we do, and I've got brochures that I can give you all on all of our activities, but one of the things we do and have done for the last 12 years is hold a Red Rose rally after each domestic and family violence related death in Queensland. We started outside of Parliament House and now they've spread across other centres in Queensland. Then on the whole, small gatherings. They only became large gatherings when society said that yes, we should grieve. So probably the death of Hannah Clark and her children and the one for Tara Brown were the biggest that we had. And the politicians came out and the media and everyone was quite distressed. I'm not taking away from that, but the death of every woman, every time has to mean something. So this year already, and we've had to go virtual with weather and COVID, etc. But this year already we've had 2. And the one before last, we had it like a virtual live talk test. And we had that hacked by the men's rights agency. You know, and when men attempt to silence women, when they attempt to shut down women, is where we've got to fight back harder. So when the government says, keep making noise, I'll say, yeah, we will. But I go to meetings where my voice keeps getting pushed down. And I think there's a lot of things about the violation of women we've got to be extremely concerned about. But to me, it is the deaths of women, the slaughter and murder of women. I was invited to the National Forum developing, we're up to the 4th National Plan. Excuse my language, but we've had 3. Why are we involved? Yet another national plan. I was invited to that, and I wanted to put on the agenda the murder of women. No, we're not going to have that. That won't get on there. We really want to keep talking about equality. And well, how can you talk about equality when the worst thing happened to women? We campaigned in Queensland and got a domestic and family violence death review board, which I'm honoured to sit on. There's now such boards in every state in Australia, and they've formed into their own committee. Not one of them was invited to participate at that national forum. Even though they asked, there were survivor groups that wanted to speak at that forum. They weren't permitted. So when we have a national agenda that's actually driven by who's allowed to speak and who's not, I think we've still got a long way to go. A long way. And there was reference made earlier about Our Watch. I don't know if people make that connection to Our Watch, and their theme they use all the time is change the story. We say no, change the ending. That the deaths of women are predictable and preventable. On our death review board, we trialled through the lives of women to see what went wrong. And we're hearing so much, and I believe we've heard from speakers this morning talking about data. In the absence of data, let's make it up. And one of my shearers that I've learned so much from was a wonderful woman, Ellen Pence. I don't know if people have heard of Ellen from the state. She has since passed on. But she did so much reform. And people were always challenging her, where did you get your data from? And her famous quote was, why would we spend money on research when we can make shit up for free, even though her programs were so well researched? And I think that's what the whole transgender is doing. And the gay men's movement as well, I might add. But through those death reviews, we have actually, in the 6 years we're into, we have, in the context of domestic and family violence, we have done a death review of 1 trans person, 2 gay men killed by other males, 6 men who were murdered by women. But when we picked those to pieces, those women that killed those men had all endured horrendous violence. And that was the only pathway available to get out. We keep hearing in the media, and there's 2 inquests coming up in Queensland for the next 2 weeks, and one certainly is the death of the murder of Hannah and her children. The other is a woman called Doreen Lackland. And what will come out of that, I hope, is just the incredible systemic violence. We often think, if we only knew, or if we only did this, or we only did that. They were known to police, they were known to the courts, they were known to not-for-profits. The average, in our death reviews, the average amount of contact that a victim will have with the service system prior to their death is 27. 27 attempts for someone to believe them. Look how shocking is that? And the highest was 55. And the woman was even noted on a file of an agency where she said, do I have to be killed before someone believes me? And the answer was yes, you do. Yes, you do. So what? Sorry if I'm traumatising
No, it's
you.
okay. I'm angry. I'm crying because I'm so angry because you're right. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. I get angry myself. Every meeting I go to, I get that close to being evicted sometimes. But I don't care. But the thing is that nothing changes. You know, yes, when my friend wrote in the same book, we know that nothing changes. I spent a week out in Western Queensland around the Indigenous services doing trainings and workshops. Well, that's what I went out there for. But sitting on the floor in a group for grandmothers, every single one of them had to bring their children. Because that's what they do. Every one of them had children. And so they're passing the kids from one to another, running in another room. Every one of those grandmothers was traumatised by their own abuse. They're now supporting daughters who are experiencing it as well. So the topic that I was going, what I am talking about, and it's so connected to what we're doing, is it's 20 years since I did the Church of Fellowship, and I remember when I was over there, someone said, what do you do in Australia? I mean, what's the support for women who are strangled? Okay, that's a weird question. I said, do you mean women who are choked? I said, no, women who are strangled by men. I don't know, that's a big problem here. And I came back and I was, at the time, managing the Gold Coast Domestic Violence Service, and I said, I seem to think this is a big thing. Do you think we should ask women? We were shocked. We were shocked what women had told us. And it led us on this journey around getting legislation. It led us on the journey of now we've got our own trauma centre. And we thought, is there enough women out there? And they're coming to us and coming to us and coming to us. We started an online support group that's now got 110 women in it. But it's not important enough that we can put it on our national agenda. And it is a crime against women. 98% the charges and crimes going through the Queensland courts are women. 98% is against women. And when we look at, the government's talking now about let's bring in a piece of legislation about coercive control, and I said, well, all domestic violence is coercive control. We wouldn't have it if it wasn't. But when we talk about a crime that is used to decide whether someone should live or die, and we're not still having public conversations about it. So the more we went down the pathway with it is we keep unravelling every day, how much more needs to be done, how much more. So we've started out by, we've got the first standalone strangulation charge in Queensland, and people are saying, and other states still don't have it. Why do you need a special? We're saying because it's a crime that needs elevating. And this might shock you too, is that, and how much going back, that was 2016, the voices of, and I'm not saying everyone in, the trans movement or etc. was involved in it, but their voices were loud enough that they wrote into that legislation the words without consent. Someone is strangled without consent. And I was saying, are you stupid? How can someone agree to an act that could kill them? It's not even informed consent. And they're saying, but it could be connected to sexual activity. And I said, but consenting to sex and consenting to strangulation. So where it's up to now in the UK, rough sex gone wrong became the biggest offence of men murdering women. And there was a well-known case in New Zealand around rough sex. So it is part of intimate partner violence, but it's also well outside of that. Strangulation of women. So we have been lobbying now since that came in about, and we still are, getting consent removed. And I'm telling you, it's an uphill battle. Even in Queensland, where we've got the task force looking at women in the justice system, aren't seeing that as an issue. They aren't seeing that it's an issue that when they talk about consent in the consent in the way about whether people are consenting to sexual activity, that they've got to have laws around consent to strangulation. So then it moved us down that path about the injuries to women. And we still probably don't have any idea. Because, yes, there are women that might be murdered, but predominantly the women come into our trauma centre, well, the fact that they are alive. But I would say there's none that don't have lifelong injuries. They have things ranging from vocal cord dysfunction right through to strokes, where strangulations cause blood clots. The biggest thing that we're finding is what's called anoxic brain injury. If someone is strangled to the point of unconsciousness, there's a big chance that both the blood and oxygen level to their brain has been affected. So we've done a piece of research with Central Queensland Uni with 20 women that'll be out soon, and what it has shown is, just the impact for women and women's lives. And I guess for ourselves, how things flow on into women's lives, one of the big things we're finding is the impact on women's employment. We have a doctor that had to give up her practice because one of the aftermaths of any form of anoxic brain injury is memory loss. And she said, how can I sit there when I can't remember what I've been prescribing the medications for? We have a woman that we're supporting at the moment that's a nurse that's been off for 2 years. She probably will never go back to nursing. Another woman who, people know about the Highwood bone, she got all the tests straight after the strangulation. And she's never been right. She kept saying she had pains in her throat. And often getting dismissed. She's a younger woman. And I'm only describing her to give you the context of how she was treated at a hospital when she peed on a Friday night in alcohol with a lot of taps. She was dizzy, she was vomiting, she could hardly stand up straight. And the first thing they asked her, what drugs have you taken? She said, I haven't taken drugs. Oh, you must have. And she said, no. And they said, well, we won't do any other treatment until you drug tested. And she was to the point, they had to get a chair for her to sit down. And she had a mobile phone, one of our team. And this was about 10 o'clock at night. She rang, she said, she started to lose her voice. She said, could you speak to them about strangulation? And so a member of our team got on and they said to her, they said to her, oh, where'd you get your medical degree? And were quite dismissive. And at that stage, the blood test came back negative to drugs. And she said, that woman, there's something serious going on. They did the CT scan and she was stroking. She ended up not stroking. And the effects are long term. We know that domestic violence can cause a lot of long-term injuries, but there was a study done out of Big Health where women admitted to hospital for domestic violence injuries, 61% of those injuries are to the neck and above. 61% are going to have injuries, they're going from So that sort of like led us to believe sometimes it's concussion, they might get, belted around the head or something, but sometimes the strangulation is lifting someone and throwing them. And it is a shocking form of violence, but it's something that, we're out there all the time trying to get breakthrough on this. And we've finally got funding, very small amount of funding, I might add, for a pilot, 1 year pilot, we're 2 months into this pilot, to actually see if such a service is needed. So we've got to be all the time trying to justify, yes, we need it. It doesn't get picked up from other interventions. Most of our domestic violence services are resource stretched, and the most that someone would be able to go to them is 4 to 6 weeks. These women need long term. They've got trauma, they've got PTSD, and they need that support, but they've also got definitely some form of brain injury, the vast majority of them. Which has led us on to the other form of men who strangle their children. And again, we had a webinar with a paediatrician from the US that started to specialise in this, and we asked someone from our child safety to come along, and they said, I don't think we've ever seen that. But what I want to say about men's violence against women, it won't stop until we make sure that we keep talking about men's violence. It's men out there. And do you know that the last Red Rose rally we had in person, who's been to a Red Rose rally? Yeah. We've seen more than a dozen and 20 people there. Hey? One for Hannah. I don't want to get political about this, and I'm not going to ask you to identify, but people on TV, those going to rallies about wearing a mask is in their thousands. Thousands of people will get out because we want them to wear a mask. We want women to come out about dead women, and we will get about 20. Does that tell you something's wrong? Does that tell you we need to keep making noise? Even if it doesn't win us the popular vote of the year. And I just have to say, too, as an older woman, I get so sick of people asking me when I'm going to retire. Because I think that's their way of move on. Because that whole dialogue now isn't about activism. It isn't about, demanding things for women. It's about, we can ask politely, perhaps that might work, but it doesn't. It doesn't work out there. So keep making noise, everyone. Thank you.